It can be difficult for NFL teams to upgrade at the quarterback position, especially when they've got a Pro Bowler already under center. But the Seahawks are going to try to do just that with Sam Darnold. We'll be diving into that in our first training camp preview here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're mowing your lawn in hot Kennewick, Washington, or you're over in Dublin, Ireland. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Believe it or not, we are less than 16 days away from the start of training camp, which means we got to start previewing the festivities because before you know it, fans will be descending on the VMAC for the start of the 2025 season. Going to talk quarterbacks today. We've got our Monday mailbag returning to its normal time slot. Some great questions from you, the value 12s. And we are going to continue our 90-man rundown with numbers 45 through 41. It's going to be a jam-packed episode brought your way courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDINNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. We are 16 days, really less if you're looking at the clock, away from the start of Seahawks training camp. And as a result, it's time for us to start diving into some key storylines and key questions heading into the start of the 2025 season. And of course, we've got to start things off at the most important position in professional sports. And we're going to be having an essential question to kick off all of these segments as we preview training camp. And at the quarterback position, look, it is tough to upgrade at quarterback regardless of what you choose to do. That is a position that is so hard to find the right guy. And maybe you have a player that can get you the playoffs, but that's the ceiling. The Seahawks are hoping that they have a situation where they have upgraded at quarterback, moving on from Geno Smith and bringing in Sam Darnold coming off of a breakout year in Minnesota. And the essential question here truly is, and I think this may be the most important question when you're looking at the Seahawks season upcoming here in 2025. Can Sam Darnold elevate this Seahawks team to another level? Because if we were talking about a 6 or 7 win team, you know, you'd probably feel pretty optimistic. Well, look at what Sam Darnold did in Minnesota last year. But Rob, this was a 10-win team. It was the only double-digit win team that did not make the playoffs a year ago. And at least on the defensive side of the football, many of those pieces are coming back. Offense is a different story, including at quarterback. And that muddies this picture a little bit when you're looking at Sam Darnold and the prognosis for him in Clint Kubiak's offense. But again, the offense he's playing in, there's going to be some familiarity there. So it does feel like this is one of those cases where you can make some strong arguments that Darnold is going to be able to elevate this football team. And I think you can also make some backed up arguments for the contrary, that it might be difficult for him to be able to do that because he's joining a team that did win 10 games a year ago.
Well, a team that won 10 games a year ago, Corbin, you're trying to replace a quarterback that 2 of the past 3 seasons he went to the Pro Bowl. The only season that he didn't go to the Pro Bowl as a starter for the Seahawks. Of course, he set the franchise record for the best completion percentage. That was last year at 70.4, triggering that huge bonus. And so I think that when we're going to have this conversation, you have to bring money and just desire into the conversation rather than just focusing purely on talent and on precision as a passer. And so that's one of the biggest reasons why I do think the Sam Darnold is an upgrade. I think that the youth, I think that the contract, the lower cap hit, all those things are in play. I think that the reality is that Geno Smith did not demonstrate that he wanted to return. Whereas obviously Sam Darnold was free to do whatever he wanted. He chose to sign with the Seahawks. So I think all of those things have to be said before we really get into the deeper analysis of this. I think that both of them are very talented quarterbacks. I think if you look at the statistics in some areas, Sam Darnold is better. Some areas, Geno Smith is better. I think just from the eye perspective, throwing all the numbers out, I think that Geno Smith is the more talented passer. If I needed somebody to throw a ball through a hoop at 40 yards away in some type of a skills competition, my money would be on Geno Smith. If I want to win a football game, I think that's where I have to start sliding that bet over a little bit more to Sam Darnold. Now, I know that he has obviously had his struggles. He's not walking around with any Lombardi trophies or, Super Bowl rings or anything like that, obviously, like Geno Smith. But at the same time, when you go back to the struggles that Sam Darnold had early on and how he was able to, just become revered in that Minnesota Vikings locker room. When he was basically pushed into the starting role a year ago and had his breakout season. I think that is exactly what the Seahawks are excited about. Why I do think that he is going to wind up being an upgrade, but I also think that you have to kind of narrow your lens a little bit. I think that if you are just looking statistically, I personally do expect Geno Smith to throw for more yards, quite possibly have a higher completion percentage. At the same time, I think that Sam Darnold is going to win more football games. I think that he is going to be more critical to Seattle winning football games down the stretch. I don't think you're going to see quite as many, peaks and valleys in his level of play that we saw with Geno Smith over the last 3 seasons. And that's why I applaud the Seahawks for having the courage. I felt like the Seahawks were basically capped at being kind of a 500 kind of a club with Geno Smith. I do believe that Sam Darnold gives them more upside. And that's why I think, again, this was a wise move on their part. Not only do they have Sam Darnold as their starter, but the 3rd-round pick, of course, acquired in the Geno Smith trade, they were able to get Jalen Monroe as well. And so the combination of the two, to me, allows Seattle to be much more confident at the quarterback position in 2025 than they were in 2024.
I think that you have to look at, and you did a good job doing this in your own way, but I think you have to look at both sides of the coin here, because on the flip side or plus side here, let's start with the plus side for Sam Darnold. You're talking about a guy who has played in a system that, while it was not identical in Minnesota, there's going to be a lot of similarities. There's going to be carryover with what Clint Kubiak is going to be asking Sam Darnold to do. You're going to have those timing-based concepts. There's still going to be some shot plays and rollouts to get outside the pocket that are going to be sprinkled in there to play to his strengths. And the fact that he did play for Kubiak in San Francisco, and he only played in a couple games with Brock Purdy as the starter, but when he played, he looked pretty good running Kyle Shanahan's offense, which that is a system that's going to have even more carryover in comparison to what Clint Kubiak's going to be running because of his ties to the original Shanahan system. So I think you have to look at that, and you have to look at the fact that Seattle got some players that are experienced in this system in Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's played for Kubiak, had some good numbers in New Orleans last year. Cooper Kupp playing in a similar scheme with Sean McVay, who came from the Shanahan tree, very similar to what Kevin O'Connell was running in Minnesota. So you look at some of those new pieces and you feel like you can get everybody up to speed a little quicker because there is that familiarity and there's that carryover where I think you have to, at least statistically, and I'm glad that you pointed it out this way, Rob. From a statistical standpoint, I do not expect to see Sam Darnold put up the same touchdowns, passing yards numbers that we saw a year ago. If he does, I don't know necessarily that bodes well for the Seattle Seahawks. That might not be a good sign if he's having to throw that much and put up those kind of numbers, because there is clearly going to be an emphasis on running the football better and more effectively. They're going to get back to that ground game, try to take some of that pressure and some of that burden off of Sam Darnold. And they're trying to help an offensive line that we still don't know what to expect because, yeah, you added Gray Zabel in the first round, but not really any other splashy moves to add to that group. They're counting on development of the young players that they already invested draft picks in. And so you've got those question marks. Can you get the run game going? Are you going to be able to take pressure off the O-line so that they're not getting too much pressure on Sam Darnold, who last year was okay against pressure until late in the season, but historically that has been an area he has struggled in comparison to Geno Smith, who I think was one of the better QBs at navigating pressure. So there's a lot of outside forces at play here in terms of whether or not Sam Darnold can elevate this team. I don't know that the Seahawks are looking to him to be the one that elevates them on his own. I think they're looking at their defense and thinking our defense can be kind of the signature holder for us. They can be the side of the ball that really wins games. Can Sam Darnold do a good job in the red zone? Geno Smith struggled there last year. Certainly didn't help. He had no run game down there, though. That's the caveat here. You give him a run game in Sam Darnold, you run the football effectively, you get the play action going, offensive line develops under John Benton. There's a number of dominoes that they fall in place that Sam Darnold could end up having a really, really strong season, even if it doesn't look as good statistically. And that is where his presence can really elevate this football team. I don't know that asking him to go out and throw 35 touchdowns again, I don't know that that elevates this team. That might send them the other direction in the win-loss column and not really to a fault of his own. That would just tell me that a lot of the plans for the Seahawks did not work out as planned.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is that I think that the Seahawks do want to be more of a ball control kind of a team. They don't want to just fling the ball all over the stadium and lead the NFL in passing attempts. And that's going to obviously pump up the statistics of the quarterback and the pass catchers. But at the same time, if it doesn't result in wins, then are you playing real football? Or are you playing fantasy football? And that's where I think the Sam Darnold is actually an upgrade. Although the statistics may not necessarily suggest the same. I love the fact that you kind of pointed out some of the other factors that are going to be playing into this, principally the offensive line play. Look, let's be real. Every Seahawks fan out there knows that if the offensive line doesn't perform better, then it doesn't matter who you have a quarterback. It could be Patrick Mahomes back there. It could be the reigning NFL MVP, Josh Allen, or Lamar Jackson. It doesn't really matter. If you don't have any type of improved play along the offensive line, if you have an improved running game, then it doesn't really matter at the quarterback position. But the running game is actually one of the things that I want to kind of acknowledge here for a moment, because Geno Smith is a superior athlete. He ran a couple of tenths of a second faster in the 40-yard dash. You saw at times when he was willing to escape the pocket and really scramble. The guy still has the 4.59-second wheels. That is just pretty rare for a quarterback of that size, where Sam Darnold's more in that 4.8 kind of a range. But at the same time, Sam Darnold last year had more attempts, ran for more first downs than Geno Smith did. It's that willingness to put his own body on the line for his teammates that I thought was kind of surprising, considering that Sam Darnold had to be able to read the writing on the wall. The Minnesota Vikings had just made the selection of J.J. McCarthy. So he knew that basically he was on a one-year kind of a prove-it type of a deal, whereas Geno Smith, this is his third year in Seattle. He had an opportunity to basically be anointed the king of Seattle, just knowing how important the quarterback position is in all of professional sports, as you alluded to earlier. And yet, again, Sam Darnold just plays with his heart on his sleeve a little bit more. And I as excited as I am about his upside, at the same time, I certainly want to acknowledge the mastery that Geno Smith demonstrated, at least at times, when he was evading that pass rush. There were so many times where basically he got the ball in his hands and he was evading pass rushes before he was even to look up. And so he did a remarkable job, of being able to kind of duck under pressure, see his first opportunity and fire an absolute laser. I do have some concerns about Sam Darnold in that regard. He is going to have to show quicker decision-making and that pinpoint accuracy that led him to being an early first-round pick all those years ago. But at the same time, again, I just believe in the younger player, the cheaper player, and the player that I think has the intangibles at the quarterback position. That, to me, is why he has the higher upside.
When we come back, we've got our Monday mailbag. We're going to be tackling the questions from you, the valued 12s. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game between the Mariners and the Yankees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s for tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's dive into the mailbag, shall we? Tons of questions from you, our valued listeners. Our first one here coming from Elo Tato on X. Is JSN truly ready to be the guy at wide receiver? And how do you think he will match up against top corners on opposing teams? Rob, listen, this is just my opinion. I think we've seen him as the number one guy already. I felt like second half last year that he was the number one receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, he doesn't have DK to take pressure off them now. That is the one thing to consider here.
It certainly is the one thing to consider, because I don't think that there was a lot of games in which JSN was commanding double teams. There were certainly situations, but not from the get-go of the game the way that DK Metcalf has over basically his entire career. And so that to me is a legitimate question. At the same time, Jackson Smith-Njigba, one of the things that excited me in watching him as a college prospect, when the Seahawks, of course, had selected him in the first round, was just what a highly touted prospect he was. This was the elite prospect coming out of the football-loving state of Texas before he signed with Ohio State as the number one overall rated prospect. And, of course, he had incredible success there. His statistics, we've talked about before. But every time that anybody has ever needed JSN to kind of step up, he has shined. And so I do think that is going to be one of the things the Seahawks fans should be optimistic about and excited about. Is I do think that JSN is going to excel as the number one target in this offense, because he may not have a physical freak like a DK Metcalf out there on the outside, but he also still has a Super Bowl MVP in Cooper Kupp stealing plenty of attention from defenses as well.
Our next question here that is coming from Gavin O'Reilly on X. How many pieces away do you think the Seahawks are from being a true contender, and who would you choose to fill the void? So I'll be honest, I think it's a little tough until we've actually seen this current team on the field for a couple games to really know how close that they are. But just based on what I see roster-wise, I think the Seahawks have a defense, Rob, that can win a Super Bowl. I think they have a defense that is that kind of caliber. And Mike Macdonald in year two, if he can do the magic he did with the Ravens in year two as the defensive coordinator, this group is going to be outstanding this year. So the defense, I think they're where they need to be. Although I wouldn't have any issue with adding somebody like a Trey Hendrickson or a TJ Watt to that group and making already a strength into even stronger. That said, I think that defensive side, we can make that judgment that defense is the caliber with the personnel they've got and the players returning for that to be the side of the ball that really carries this football team. The questions are on offense. We talked about in the first segment, is Sam Darnold going to be able to get the job done? Does he have the offensive line in front of him to be able to excel? Is the run game going to be a lot better than 28? They better hope it is, because if it's anywhere close to as bad as it was last year, I think it's going to be really hard for this offense to get any traction going. So until we see the way this offense comes together, I would make the argument right now adding another speedy receiver to this group. That might be your missing piece. If there's a receiver out there, a top 10 caliber guy that becomes available after you traded DK Metcalf, that might be where I'm willing to start dangling a first-round pick, because I think that is the missing piece. Or you could say, hey, if a really good guard becomes available, going out and getting Cesar Ruiz from the Saints or somebody like that, that could push your offensive line over the hump and really help accelerate the progress of that group. So I think offense would be where you're missing pieces right now. But as far as how close they are, we got to see what this looks like when we get to the regular season to have a true assessment of that. Next question here for Rob that is coming from Salvo Truco. If Sam Darnold struggles early on, this continues to be a question that's going to be asked, Rob. Does Mike Macdonald turn the keys over to Jalen Milroe? Look, fans are going to keep asking this, and I understand why they're asking it, because we know Sam Darnold's history before last year.
Well, it's not only Sam Darnold's history. I mean, it's anytime you have a new quarterback, as we talked about just a couple of moments ago. I mean, it is damn hard to replace a very successful quarterback. And look, there's a lot of Geno Smith critics out there. You can't argue with the precision passing in which he demonstrated. You can't argue with how many game-winning plays or game-winning drives, that he had over his 3 seasons in Seattle. The fact that he was, the NFL, basically bounce-back player or comeback player of the year. I mean, that's real stuff here. So it is going to be a challenge. There are going to be huge expectations for Sam Darnold. If he stubs his toe out of the gate and Jalen Milroe plays with the excitement that I expect that he's going to throughout training camp in the preseason, I think that there's going to be an awful lot of buzz out there about, hey, we should switch over the offense to Jalen Milroe. But at the same time, I would argue that even Jalen Milroe's biggest, fan is going to acknowledge that he certainly struggles in terms of just pure accuracy, drop back, throw the ball. And sometimes it's here, sometimes it's way over there. And that's going to be a problem for a ball control kind of a mindset head coach like Mike Macdonald. So look, I think that Sam Darnold is your starting quarterback. Whether the Seahawks start off the season 5-0 or 0-5, I think that Sam Darnold should be your starting quarterback. Now, if we get to 10 games, and then you're so far out of the playoff conversation that clearly you need to be kind of turning over and looking at some young talent, then there's no question about it. I'm excited as anybody about Jalen Milroe. But at the same time, to me, what Milroe provides you is a different look rather than being a legitimate starting caliber player, at least in the first couple of months of his NFL career.
Our next question here is for both of us, Rob, from Xavier Mitchell. Which player from last season do you think will bounce back after a bumpy last season? So that could be somebody that missed time with injury, struggled to stay healthy, or wasn't as productive when on the field. So, look, I'm going with Riq Woolen for this one. I look at the fact that he's going to be a free agent next year. He's going into his second season in Mike Macdonald's defense. And you can make an argument the corners, that was the group that improved the most in year 2. Under Mike Macdonald. That's another reason to be excited about Devin Witherspoon, but Witherspoon's not having a bounce back season. He was still really good last year, and Woolen had his moments, but he also got benched briefly for a second straight year. The tackling was still inconsistent, some broken assignments, miscues. This is a player that still the Seahawks aren't sure if they want to extend him or not, even though he is an athletic freak as much as any corner in the NFL. To me, Riq Woolen is the candidate, being year 2 in Mike Macdonald's defense. Macdonald knowing him better. I think he is the guy that we are going to see really ramp up his game in part because, look, you got a lot of money riding in this too, and I think Riq Woolen's aware of that. He wants to be a more consistent player, so that's my selection.
Oh, I think it's a great selection. I think for a lot of different reasons. I mean, the fact that he is entering his final year of his rookie contract, I think is also going to be a huge motivator. The player that I want to kind of highlight here, just for a moment at least, before I really kind of shift my attention, but I think Boye Mafe, and although he was the Dallas Cowboys, DeMarcus Lawrence, both of them, of course, had some injuries early on, but they were spectacular early in the season. They both had injury problems. DeMarcus Lawrence was knocked out for the season. Boye Mafe just was limited, but over their first 3 games, they each had 3 sacks. And so, again, I think that stretched out over the course of an entire season, they both could be absolute monsters in 2025. But as we've been talking about, the real question marks are not on defense, they're on offense. And so, to me, the single biggest determiner of how good this season is going to be, it's not going to be the quarterback. It's going to be the offensive line. And that, to me, is going to be the conversation about Abraham Lucas. If you get your right tackle, a Pro Bowl caliber right tackle, who also was entering the final year of his rookie contract, you get him back healthy, he starts 17 games, then I feel very, very confident the Seahawks are marching into the playoffs, not worrying about whether they can sneak in week 18, but marching into the playoffs. But if he is not healthy, then I think that you could have a return to what we saw a year ago, where it's going to be a round table at the right tackle position, and the Seahawks are going to struggle, Sam Darnold included.
And I think Christian Haynes would be the other player I'd mention here, because last year was a big disappointment, not starting any games, but he looks to be the one that's out in front going into this next training camp. And if you could get a solid starting season out of him, that would be an absolute game changer for not just this year for the Seahawks, but for the future as well. So I think there's a number of names you could throw out there. Ken Walker's another one that I considered leading the run game. Last question that we've got here real quick. Speaking of the run game, this one coming from Buckethead Jedi on Blue Sky. I think we need to make a movie, Star Wars, about that guy. Question that is coming on the heels of the running back position here. What is the chance Zach Charbonnet ends up being the primary running back this season? So, look, I don't think it's a crazy question because we know Ken Walker III's health issues, and Charbonnet's got 2 more years under contract. And Walker's a free agent this year. If Walker is not able to really rediscover his rookie form, then maybe this is something Seattle could end up doing where even running more zone, Zach Charbonnet can run zone and gap. He's capable of doing both. If this ends up being a player that Clint Kubiak prefers and John Benton prefers, I mean, we saw in the Shanahan scheme in Denver, there was a lot of times the more athletic guy was not the one that was the star running back. I mean, Mike Anderson ran for 1,000 yards in this offense. So they're going to be looking for guys that run the offense the right way. If Charbonnet ends up being that guy, look, this might seem high to some people, but I'm going to go with a 25% chance just because we did see what Charbonnet could do last year when he had his opportunity to start. And until we see Ken Walker go out there and absolutely explode like I think he's capable of, there should be a little reservation there that maybe Zach Charbonnet in this offense, maybe he could be that guy. And let's face it, he is much more athletic than Olandis Gary or Mike Anderson or any of those guys who were 1,000-yard rushers in Denver's scheme with Mike Shanahan. So it is definitely possible, if it's not probable, but it is at least possible that this could be something that could happen. When we come back, we got 90-man countdown, numbers 45 through 41. That's coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Time to continue our 90-man rundown. We are now into the second half of our countdown here, and we've got numbers 45 through 41. There's going to be some rookie flavor in here, some draft picks. We're going to have a few veterans. We've got a free agent edition. Let's start off with a player, though, that I'm going to be honest, if we were doing a list of the 5 players that I was most intrigued by going into training camp, this would be a player that would be on this list that would really surprise our listeners, I think, because I am fascinated to see what Jamie Sheriff does as a hybrid linebacker, because that's what the Seahawks are trying to do with him. And we saw last year, this is another player. He arrived late. Like he signed first week in training camp. He signed with the Seahawks. And then he goes out in the preseason and gets a couple sacks. It felt like he was hitting the quarterback every time that they dropped back in preseason play. Didn't make the roster. The Panthers plucked him off waivers, suited up for a game, then he gets cut. Eventually, he finds his way back to Seattle, but you saw him succeed as an edge rusher, at least in exhibition games. But the Seahawks are looking for him to add another thing to his toolbox, so they've been working him some as an off-ball linebacker. And Mike McDonald has talked about this some this offseason, that he had some fascinations with guys that were hybrids in the pre-draft process, guys that could play off-ball and off the edge. And if Jamie Sheriff can make that transition where he can at least semi-play that position, I think it does help his chances of being the number 5 guy in that edge rushing group.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, his primary role, I think, is still going to be as a pass rusher. He's just got some natural pass rush ability to him. You mentioned the preseason games for the Seahawks a year ago. In 3 preseason games, Pro Football Focus charged him with 14 pressures. He had 3 sacks officially. He should have had a 4th sack. But again, his ability just to get to the quarterback, I think, is the most intriguing. But he also just locates the football really well. I mean, like those sacks I mentioned a moment ago, he wasn't just beating tackles, although he beat them occasionally. But a lot of times he would rush upfield. Actually, in one of his sacks, he got knocked to the ground, picked himself back up, found the quarterback, and then he takes a very direct angle to the ball. It shows a little bit of closing speed. That quickness, that instincts, that closing speed, those are all traits that, go well with the off-ball linebacker position as well. And of course, knowing McDonald's success in helping these players become hybrid superstars, then, yeah, I'm very intrigued by Jamie Sheriff as well.
Coming up next on our list, look, we go from somebody that's got some flash to his game to a player who is a long snapper. There's no flash to the game for a long snapper, but Chris Stahl, look, we got to give this guy a ton of credit. Since the Seahawks brought him in a few years ago as an undrafted rookie out of Penn State, he has been incredibly reliable. He's been a big part of the success for both Jason Myers and Michael Dixon. Let's face it, your punter and kicker, they are impacted directly by the long snapper, the timing mechanism. If you ever go to an NFL practice and you watch the way that the timing works and just how critical that is, your long snapper is the one, he's the engine that gets it going, both your kick and punt game. And when you're not getting mentioned as a long snapper, that is a good thing. And Chris Stahl has been incredibly accurate with his snaps, whether it's long snapping to the punter, whether it's the short snaps on kicks, you name it. He's been incredibly reliable. So, look, we can't throw out a bunch of stats here, but that's okay because that means Chris Stahl is doing his job. I mean, I wouldn't want to be saying 7 airmailed snaps. Like, you don't have a job if you do that. And he has been a huge part of the reason that Michael Dixon and Jason Myers have been as successful as they have as the kicker and punter for the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, Corbin, just because you said we're not going to throw out any stats, I want to throw out a couple of stats just to kind of piss you off a little bit and make some fun, have some fun with it, No, but I mean, this is a good player. As you said, I mean, people get excited about Chris Stahl, but when you are as reliable as he is, then I think that it is easy to forget about him. But the first statistic I would throw out would be 0, because I've watched every single field goal attempt or punt all season, for the last several years with the Seahawks, and Chris Stahl has not had an errant snap yet. That's 2 seasons with the Seahawks, and that's going back to his senior season with the Penn State Nittany Lions when he won the Patrick Manelli Award as the nation's best long snapper. He didn't have any misses there. He started the final 4 years of his career at Penn State. He was a team captain. Again, this guy is just as reliable as it gets. Now, another statistic out there that people might be interested in is he's a long snapper. What's he earning? $1.03 million this year, which might sound like a lot of money. I mean, you're getting paid over $1 million just to snap footballs. Well, again, when you snap with the precision and the consistency in which that Stahl does, then you deserve that money. And oh, by the way, that's 27th in the NFL among long snappers. So it's not like he's getting paid very, very well. Now, he is in the final year of his 3rd year in an NFL team. He's an undrafted free agent, so he's on a 3-year contract rather than a 4-year or 5-year contract for players that are drafted. So it's going to be interesting to see if Chris Stahl continues to play very well, he is going to get a raise, whether it be from the Seahawks or from somebody else. But he is an underrated star in Seattle's special teams unit.
Let's go to the secondary. One of the interesting additions that the Seahawks made in free agency, they went out and signed a couple of players. We talked about DeAnthony Bell earlier in the countdown, a guy that I really like as an add-on to this safety group that, quite frankly, the Cleveland Browns, I think it's foolish that they let that guy go, but I digress. Shamar Jefferson had to wait several years to finally get significant snaps in the secondary in the NFL. He was a special teams guy with Green Bay, New Orleans. And then last year, he finally got to suit up for a lot of snaps in a 4-game span. He had his first ever interception, got his hands on a pass breakup, gave up some plays in coverage. But as I've talked about in OTAs and minicamp, I just loved the peskiness that this guy brought to the table. You can tell that he's the kind of mentality that Mike Macdonald craves in the secondary. He doesn't care that he's a smaller guy for a boundary corner. He likes to get under people's skin. He likes to play physical football. And at OTAs, you got to really hold those guys back because of rules. But I just love the I'm not going to back down from anyone mentality. And he's been a pretty darn good tackler in his career, whether on special teams or on defense. And so while right now he would not be playing snaps on defense, this is a guy that I think gives them some pretty good depth. And he is absolutely going to be a core special teams player for Mike Macdonald's team.
Yeah, he was a very competitive gunner on the Saints special teams unit a year ago, and so I think that is going to add, just some depth at that spot for the Seahawks. The versatility that he offers on defense, whether it be outside, he's 5'10", 383 pounds, and this is not a big corner. But at the same time, he does kind of punch above his weight class. He can slide inside that nickel spot. The Seahawks, of course, don't have Artie Burns anymore. Shamar Jean-Charles reminds me a little bit of Artie Burns, and that he is a little bit scrappy. He does have the ability to make plays on the football. I want to see him locate the ball a little bit better. I think that can kind of boost his interception opportunities, because I do think that there's going to be a lot of footballs thrown his way. But again, I think that Shamar Jean-Charles is a good player that makes Seattle deeper, not necessarily a starter, but a good quality player that can get you through and stretch.
Let's wrap up this latest cluster with a couple of fifth-round picks and much different style players. You've got Torrey Horton, the tall, speedy, and we're talking legitimate 4.3 speed receiver from Colorado State, who scored a bunch of touchdowns, had multiple 1,000-yard seasons for the Rams, took over a game where Travis Hunter was playing against him for a good chunk of it and put up big numbers. And he's also had 3 punt returns in his college career. So Torrey Horton, he's going to bring you that big play element. And from my understanding, I talked to somebody about this a week ago, he is expected to be full go for the start of training camp. Now they've had this buffer between OTAs and mandatory mini camp and the start of training camp. He should be ready to hit the ground running, which is great to get that 4.3 speed out there and see where he fits in offensively. I still could see him being a guy that really rises up that depth chart quickly because he has that legitimate downfield playmaking ability. He can create after the catch, and of course, the special teams value. And then on the other hand, look, Robbie Ouzts ain't going to be running a 4.3, but Robbie Ouzts is 270-plus pounds and had pretty good agility testing numbers. And look, running a 4.9 at 275 pounds as a fullback, I'm totally cool with it. He had a rock-solid 10-yard split, which that's what really matters, flying out of your stance. But this is about bringing physicality and just that ornery mindset to Seattle's offense that they have really lacked the last couple of years, having that tone setter out of the backfield that strikes fear in opposing players because he's built like a massive tight end. That's what he played at Alabama. But he's got the quickness and the footwork. And, oh, by the way, he caught 2 touchdowns last year. So if you let him wide open, he can burn you as a pass catcher too. And maybe this year at some point we'll get to hear Ouzts get yelled from the crowd with Robbie Ouzts snagging his first NFL touchdown. But 2 guys that I absolutely think should be a big part of this offense as rookies as long as they're healthy.
Yeah, similar to the way that, I think I can't remember his first name, but Kuhn was the fullback.
John Kuhn.
John Kuhn, for the fullback for the Green Bay Packers, and I'm sure John Schneider heard that probably more times than he'd like. But similar, I think that Robbie Ouzts has opportunity to kind of be a fan favorite. I think that he is a chance just because of his frame, because he is powerful. He is quicker than you say. He's more explosive, as you kind of acknowledged, than you'd expect. I mean, 4.91 in the 40-yard dash. I think a lot of people would be like, oh, he's not a good athlete. But he had a 9-foot, 11-inch broad jump. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. That's an explosive athlete at 274 pounds. So again, I think that he is going to be that traditional, just basically a Sherman tank of a lead block, of being able to knock people on their backside. I also think that he has some quickness to him. He does have soft hands to him. You mentioned the 2 touchdowns this past season that he had for Alabama. So I think that he can play a versatile role for the Seahawks. Excited to see what he can do. And excited to see what he can do is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. We're having a conversation about Torrey Horton. Corbin, you talked about before that, there are some players out there like a Jamie Sheriff that you were really excited to see. Torrey Horton, Sam Darnold, Jalen Monroe, DeMarcus Lawrence. Those are, a handful of the guys I personally am most excited to see. If the Seahawks hit on Torrey Horton, if he is the player I think that he could be, then my concerns about the wide receiver position basically vanish. My concerns about the returner position, whether it be a punt or a kick returner, basically vanish. I think this guy can be special. He just has to stay healthy. He's 185 pounds soaking wet, and those types of wide receivers have struggled with durability, and he has struggled with durability. But at the same time, I think that they need a guy that can be a deep ball threat. This guy has that type of juice. He tracks the ball well. He, like Robbie Ouzts, a whole different level than Ouzts, has the lateral agility to be able to make people miss. He's not just a straight line guy. He can make people miss. He is physical. He is competitive. He's a good football player. He's a guy that I think has all the upside in the world. I just hate counting too much on a rookie. And so I think that his upside is through the roof. I'm very curious to see what he's able to provide for the Seahawks in 2025.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to continue our training camp preview and flip over to the cornerback position. Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen and company, and we'll have some more 90-man profiles as well. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.